So today I'm doing a quick review on Fuji's 35mm 1.4 lens. I've had this lens for quite some time now, but I've been using it more and more often very recently for street photography as well as for portraits. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on the lens. In case you're interested, this video is being shot on the X-T4 with the 23 1.4 lens, wide open at 1.4, autofocus and face detect on. So if it's a setup that you've been interested in using for yourself or something like this, I guess you'll be able to see how it does. I've never used it, the 1.4 on for this sort of thing, because I don't trust it, to be honest. But we'll see. We'll see how it does. So as far as the build of this lens goes, it's a pretty light lens at about 187 grams. So it's it's pretty easy to have hanging around your neck all day. Now this is the XH1, one of Fuji's bigger, heavier bodies. But if you have it on a lighter camera, it's definitely not an issue as far as weight goes, or having it in your bag. It's pretty small and light. I forget it's there. Usually when I travel, I prefer to have a zoom lens, at least when light is good on the camera. And then, for those certain shots, I prefer something with, subject separation or whatever, just to use that 1.4. Then I can put the 35 on. And again, it's so light and small that, I often forget that I even have it in the bag. You just don't feel the difference with or without it being back there. The lens has no image stabilization, of course. I don't think any of Fuji's prime lenses have it except for the macro lens. But that's fine for me anyway. So all of my bodies, I have the XH1 and the X-T4 currently. They all have IBIS, so that part doesn't bother me. And for the most part, it's pretty normal for primes not to have image stabilization on it. As far as the actual build quality, it seems to be mostly metal, as far as I can tell. The focus ring feels nice and smooth. I bought this lens used, so there was no, I know often for a lot of lenses, everything's a little bit stiffer in the beginning and you kind of have to break it in a little bit. This lens I bought used. The focus ring feels nice. It has just a nice amount of resistance. The aperture ring, to me, is within the good range of being loose enough. I know that's subjective as to what loose is, right? But to me, it feels just the right amount. It's not stiff where you feel you need to push it, but it's not so loose where you're constantly worrying about knocking it out of place. Not that it's never happened, but it doesn't happen very often. Unlike the lens that's on that camera right now, the 23 1.4, it's just, it just moves way too easily. So luckily with this lens, that's not an issue. This lens has no weather sealing, which is something that I don't like about this lens. It's becoming one of my favorites for street photography. I've been taking it out more than my 23 f2, which used to be my favorite go-to street photography lens. But this is definitely taking over its place. At least in the past year it has, or 2 years. But it has no weather resistance. That's something I really hope they update in the next version of this lens, because like this past month we've been getting a lot of snow and just really bad weather, which often makes for good street photography. But I don't take the lens because I don't want to ruin it. Of course, there's a 35 f2, but I already have a 35. I really don't want to have two 35 lenses. I mean, who knows? I can't see myself trading in this lens for the 35 f2 just for the weather sealing. I've got other lenses that get close enough with weather sealing. So for me, I'm sticking with this one. Currently, the lens retails for about $600. So that price considering, I think the build quality is pretty good, though I do look forward to them updating this lens. So without going into a whole pixel peeping trip, I can tell you this lens is sharp. At f1.4, I have no hesitation to use it wide open, whether it's for portraits or street photography or whatever. It probably isn't one of Fuji's best in terms of image quality. However, there is a certain look, character, whatever you want to call it, that's kind of hard to explain. You just have to look at the image and compare it to Fuji's other lenses. And I don't know, either you see it or you don't see it. I see something special in the image this lens produces. Sort of like the 50 f2 that I own versus the 56 or 1.2 And not just because the 56 does 1.2, even if you shoot them both at f2, the 56 just had a certain look to it. Some might say that it's, you know, not as sharp, but still there was something special about it. So I think the same thing applies to this 35. Maybe because of its simpler build, I'm not sure what it is. I'm not gonna even try to explain it. All I know is that for how I use this for portraits and for street photography, I've been very happy with this lens. I like it so much that I hope that when they update this lens, they really don't mess with the glass, I guess you could say. I know some people would might disagree, I don't know, but I would just say focus on the autofocusing system and the weather sealing. But as far as what they've done with the glass and the look it gives, I am perfectly happy with it. I have no complaints, whatever. You know, there are certain lenses that I want to have to be perfect, to be just flawless as far as chromatic aberrations or distortion or corner sharpness and that sort of thing. This lens and how I use it is not a lens that I want that clinical look, as some people call it. Just leave it alone as far as image quality goes. Yeah, I'm really happy with the image quality of this lens. There is chromatic aberrations, nothing extreme, like I've had some other lenses where it's really bad. But you know, it's something that's easy enough to fix, I think, most times. So it's not a bad issue. So again, as far as image quality, again, without going into the whole pixel peeping thing, it's sharp, it does well. Really, there aren't many people complaining about its image quality. I think it does very well, especially considering that it's an older lens. And again, it just has a certain look that I really enjoy, that I would rather than just leave it alone. Whatever flaws it has, just leave it alone if it's going to take away from that look. Now, generally speaking, for photos, the autofocus works perfectly fine. However, take into consideration how I use my cameras as far as photos go. It's, you know, travel, street photography, portraits, and just general family, personal use. So if when I say it's fine, probably not for sports or something like that, although I don't think this is exactly the focal length for most people would use for sports or any sort of action. But in any case, just keep that in mind. Keep in mind how I use this lens. So autofocus works fine. It does work better now on the newer bodies. I know when I had it on the X-T2, I definitely saw it hunted more and that sort of thing. On the newer bodies like the X-T4 that I'm shooting with, it definitely performs a lot better even then compared to the X-H1. No, it's not as good as the 23 f2 or the 50 f2 or the newer lenses. There are times when it fumbles. I won't even try to recreate it, because in studio, whenever I try to recreate these things, they never work. You know, it'll work flawlessly. Or even if I go outside and, you know, it's those moments where I'm out on the street and I suddenly see something and I bring it up and it'll just do a funny thing. But for the most part, like I said, I never don't use this lens because of its autofocus. Yes, there are frustrating moments, but not enough to keep me from using the lens. As far as autofocus in video goes, I would probably use it for something like this, you know, just kind of talking head sort of situation, or YouTube, or you're just sitting in a chair or standing next to something. I probably would use it for something like that. However, I wouldn't use it for anything more important, paid work, unless, again, it's something like this, but I probably just switch it to manual focus. But anything with a lot of movement or a lot of chaos or anything crazy like that, I definitely wouldn't use the autofocus on this lens. Even the newer ones, the 23, the 50, but they're a little bit better. I've been trying to use Fuji for video work. However, it hasn't been working out as much as I wanted to, because I wanted one system for photos and video. I don't mean just with this lens, I mean just in general, as a system in general. I'll still use it, again, depending on what the client is looking for. But primarily, I've had to go to Sony for my main video camera. For the most part, the video work that I'm doing is music videos. A lot of these are very run and gun, sort of not very well planned, unfortunately, and they can get very chaotic. You know, they're supposed to do one thing, but then the music is on and they all get pumped up and it just changes, and sometimes those changes are much better than what was originally planned. So I'm not gonna yell out cut, you didn't stick to the script. A lot of those unplanned, kind of random, spontaneous movements that happen, they're actually better than what was scripted, and the Fuji just can't keep up. And then, you've got a client that's excited about, wow, can I see that? And then you're like, oh, yeah, it's not in focus. Whereas, the Fuji, the Sony, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because I'd like to use Fuji for both video and photos, but the Sony, unfortunately for me, is quite, it's several steps ahead of Fuji when it comes to video autofocus. So, but if it wasn't for that, I'd rather just keep one system. So I'm not going to pretend to know too much about the technical aspects of how that works or why that is. I think Fuji's latest camera bodies have come a long way when it comes to video autofocusing, or even stills. And I'm pretty sure it's a lens design difference. There's something they're not doing, I suppose, with their lenses, the motors. I'm not sure. Again, I don't want to pretend that I know how this works. Philip Bloom did a very extensive video on that, and if you want, I guess, a more technical or detailed explanation, he's probably the man to do it. But let's just see how it performs under very kind of controlled circumstances. Again, I wouldn't use this for anything more than at most this much action going on. According to the box in the rear screen there and the white eye box there, it says I am in focus. But again, for the way I use it for work, this is like not too often. At least 50% of the shots that I need, there's just a lot more movement. Some of the music is very hyper, very fast tempo, so there's just not too many situations where this is as good as it gets. I'm just trying to move a little bit quicker now to see how it keeps up with my face. Again, it's not terrible. It's not terrible. I don't think. I'm gonna have to check I have to review the footage. See, I'm looking at the screen and I see a green box on my face and the white box on my eyes, so I just assume it's in focus. But we all know that, at least anybody who's owned a Micro Four Thirds Panasonic camera knows that a green box means very little. You actually have to look at the footage to know for a fact. Almost tripped myself. If you are in focus. So as far as background blur or bokeh, I think this lens does pretty well. I really like the quality in which it does it. Again, in my opinion, bokeh is very subjective. So, there's some people that will say a certain lens has very nervous bokeh, whatever that means. There's other people who don't see that. All they see is the blur. It also depends on where you're using it. There's certain environments that are definitely a lot tougher to get nicer looking bokeh, such as where there's a lot of tree branches in the back, that sort of thing. Anyways, this is a lens that to me never fails. It always looks good, especially for if you're doing with people and this sort of kind of headshot or half body shots and that sort of thing. I think the quality is pretty good. Again, if you're going to start comparing in detail, I'm sure you're going to find flaws, but I like it. I have no problems with the bokeh this particular lens creates. I am sorry for the lack of new photos in this video. It's been a slow year, I'm sure, for a lot of us with the pandemic and all that, so I just haven't been out as much for street photography or for portraits, really. And I didn't want to fill the video with recycled photos from previous videos. overall, I am very happy with this lens. It's become my primary lens for street photography, at least at the moment. As far as portraits go, which I really enjoy using it, it's become right up there. I mean, the 50 f2 is one of my favorite lenses to use, that I have at least. But this is right behind it, not too far behind it really. I'm not seeing much of a difference, and I just like that certain look that this lens gives me that the 50 just doesn't. You know, this is just my opinion, but I think the 50 f2 gives a cleaner sort of image, but this just has a certain look that I really love, and I'm very happy with this lens. I do look forward to the update. I am, however, nervous that they're going to take away that magic in an effort to fix the flaws. Anyways, this is it. This is it for this review. Again, I'd recommend this lens to anybody. You can get them used for about $200 off of retail, or cheaper sometimes, depending on how beat up it is. But this is a lens I definitely recommend to anybody. It's not the top performing as far as autofocus goes and that sort of thing, but it's no slouch either. Definitely recommend this lens. I'm hoping to put it to more use as this whole pandemic thing is kind of settling down and we're able to get out there a little bit more and get some portrait shoots going and that sort of thing. But that's it for this review. I do have some others that I'm currently working on. I know it's been, I think, almost a year, 10 months or something like that since I've uploaded anything. The pandemic is 90% of the reason why, as well as some other things. For those of you who follow this channel, you may see that there is a difference in where I'm at. I've changed locations from where I used to be. I live somewhere else. My studio is somewhere else. So all those things have kind of kept me pretty busy with life, but things are kind of settling down, so I think I'll be able to get back into making these videos. I do miss making them, and I do enjoy making them. And for those who've stayed subscribed and haven't left in the 10 months that I haven't put out a single video, thank you. I do appreciate it. I do have a lot of content that I am working on. I'm putting together and hoping to bring this channel back to life, and really want to make an effort to post regularly. Thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed, I don't know, maybe try it out. You might enjoy it. That's it from me. I'll see you guys next time.